Continuing with our demo of depth of field with a motion graphic piece rendered from Cinema 4D. Now we're going to work in After Effects for a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in the files that I rendered out. So import file. Here it is. So you'll notice we've got, I'm going to put it on the list, we've got two different types of files. Actually, these are old. So we've got motion blur depth, and we've got motion blur RGB, just like I told you it would happen. Okay, so motion blur depth, I'm going to go ahead and bring that in, make sure it's telling me it's going to do a PNG sequence. So fantastic, and I'll import my RGB sequence as well. Just clicking on the first one and bring that in. Okay, so the one thing I want to do now is to create a composition. So I'm going to grab both of these and just bring them straight down. Single composition, yes. Now we want to have the RGB colors, or the RGB group on top. So scrubbing through right now, you can see our animation, but there's no depth of field. So in order to create that depth of field, I'm just going to click on Effect, and I'm going to go down to Blur. I'll go ahead and do it up here so you can actually see it. Effect, Blur, Sharpen, and I'm going to put a lens blur on my RGB object. So scrolling down on the RGB object, you can see lens blurs in that effect. Now notice in the effects palette, it's asking me which depth map layer do I want to use. So right now it's just applying an arbitrary blur to the entire thing. But notice if I choose my motion blur depth channel, now you can see that it's actually focusing on only the sphere object. So this is where you get to sort of play around with your settings. It's going to come in with a default amount of blur, and you can change that by changing the iris radius. So maybe I want a little bit less blur. So notice the lower I change that, I can go from nothing to very blurry. So I'm going to go ahead and keep it at 10 right now. And because our depth map is changing, you'll notice our depth of field should change as well. So now I'm still focused on the middle. Now I'm focusing on the rear sphere a little more. Front sphere is very blurry. And towards the end, we should see that we're focused on the front sphere, and the rear and back sphere are more blurry. So this is how you create depth of field with motion objects in Cinema 4D.